Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the Bamberg County School District Board of Trustees meeting. Today's date is February 22nd, 2022, and it is 6:00 p.m. I do see that we have a quorum, so we need to move forward on the agenda. But before I do that, I would like to acknowledge our Bamberg County Sheriff, Mr. Kenneth Bamberg. We thank you again for joining us, sir. Appreciate your service. We are down to item number 2 on the agenda, which is approval of the agenda. What is the pleasure with regards to the approval of agenda?
Yeah, that the agenda be approved as presented.
We have a motion on the floor that the agenda be approved as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of approval of the agenda, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? All right, hearing none, the ayes have it and the motion carries. We are now down to item number 3, which is approval of the minutes for February 7th of 2022. You have all had an opportunity to receive and review the minutes prior to tonight's meeting. What is the pleasure of the board with regards to approval of the minutes for February 7th?
Chairman, I move to approve the minutes as presented.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that it has been moved to approve the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of approval of the minutes for February 7, 2022, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it and the motion carries. We are now down to item number 4 on the agenda, which is board member training, school boards, roles, responsibilities, organization, ethical considerations, and FOIA. And I will now turn that over to our attorney, Mr. Boykin.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members.
Good evening.
Good evening. A couple of questions. I happened to run across a couple of this weekend. And my theory is that you were there for training, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. My belief then is that you went through the one-day orientation, which would have included ethical considerations, right? Did you talk about ethics?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
new board training, right?
Yeah, new member training, talk about ethics, okay? So, in the words of my late father, that should be enough to get you through a couple of weeks. And so, with your permission, I would like to go ahead and begin to talk about conflict management for school boards. I know this is a waste of time because I anticipate no conflict here. But just out of abundance of caution, we'll give you a vaccination tonight. What about that?
Okay.
Sir?
I mean, I have no problem doing the ethics, but there's so much that board members will need to be exposed to. And getting it done early, I think, is fine. Okay, let's see if we talk a little bit about that. Okay. Conflict is a common occurrence in almost any governing organization. That's something that, I mean, it's to be expected. And so the biggest problem that we see is that often folk do not know how to deal with or to handle conflict. And that's where it gets out of hand and it begins to get into the organization. It causes unnecessary dysfunction or deterioration, right? In a healthy organization, manage conflict in a constructive manner, stimulates creative problem solving, and strengthens the organization. Because what happens often is you're here, somebody else is here. And that thinking out of the box, that creativity is how you work together in order to bring about a solution to what it is that you're working on. And that's what I think we're talking about. Without disagreement, a board may find itself simply doing rubber stamps. And you don't add anything to it. Doesn't mean you have to be skeptical, but you must be curious. Okay? It's the difference between being skeptical and being curious. Consistent board, being unanimous without debate or disagreement can signal a group think. Okay? There's another name for group think, but I will not say that here because we're not. The thing though is I encourage board members to talk to one another. I understand FOIA, and FOIA says that a quorum cannot come together without being a duly called meeting. But there is nothing that separates two board members from talking and learning to talk strategically about what is coming before. You're not asking someone to vote with you on a particular position because that's not the purpose. What you're seeking to do is to gain an understanding, gain insight, and you're learning to talk strategically about what's coming before you. And then poor management of conflict can cause the community to lose confidence in district leadership. That would be the superintendent and the board. No one's. Churches lose membership when the members are always bickering. Okay? Any organization where folk are bickering, fraternities and sororities, they lose membership. Rotary, Kiwanis, they lose membership. Where people are bickering, most of the time, folk just don't want to be mixed up in that kind. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. School boards are targets for conflict. You need to understand this. You are targets for certain reasons. You include generally a diverse membership. And so, folks see an opportunity, let's play one against the other based on what we think the other would be. Another is that passionate individuals. I mean, you can't get a group of people more passionate than school board members or those folk who are connected to the schools. It's important. Require shared leadership, and that's important. Every elected board member is a leader. Everyone is a leader. And so you're sharing that as you work, and sometimes people would like to display that leadership at times that are not conducive. Require unity and focus in achieving the district's mission and goals. Within all the noise, accountability wins. School board members, you still must work together to accomplish something. And when you do that, everyone's not going to agree with you. So at some point, you've got to be confident in your resolve that what you're doing is right, and you begin to move forward with that. Okay? Require balancing of various interests and demands and operating in a dynamic political environment. You are nonpartisan, but you are always gathering a group of people. And so persons with political agendas or persons with political persuasions can come in and, I'm not going to say hijack, but seek to impose their interests, their agenda onto the interests of the school board community. You don't have conflict and necessarily try to compete with that group, but you must have resolve to seek what it is you're trying to do for children without allowing your agenda to be hijacked by someone who would have a different purpose. But you don't argue because that creates a conflict and that becomes problematic. Conflict may arise in a variety of transactions and relationships. The superintendent and administration, there could be some conflict. How does that happen? With persons in the administration deciding that the superintendent, I'm not exactly sure I agree with her, so let me talk to board member A, B, or C to try, and that leads to dysfunction, but that simply doesn't work well. And board members must learn how to work through that kind of thing and not allow it to come between the board and the superintendent. Another would be, staff, same thing. And then there are community members. There's an old saying, and I don't know who said it, but it makes so much sense to me. The further you are away from the topic, the more you know about it.
Wow.
Just thought I would share that with you, okay? And then there are board members. We're all elected by the same number of people. That's called the redistricting. We all have the same power, okay? And that's why we have to learn to work together, because we are sharing power. And then regulatory bodies. Regulatory bodies for different reasons, because you'll have sometimes people who will contact the regulatory body and they'll come out and they'll ask questions. Your inquiry should never be, who complained? The truth is you don't care. All you care about is that you're doing it right. And so if you look at it as when you were students, you were all good students in school, and you couldn't wait to Friday when you had exams. Now, I know they didn't do that in your, I was old, and we always had exams on Fridays, right? And you look forward to Friday because that meant that it depends, it's 10 point, during recess, the papers be graded, and you get to go home and show your mama, hey, that's what you look for. I mean, I didn't make an A now, let me get that straight. My brother says, the further you get away from what actually happened, the more complex and large the achievements that you made. For example, when I played football, as high as I weighed about 210, right? That was back in the day, I had to train down. But the further you get away from it, it gets a little larger, a little faster. Okay. But regulatory bodies, what we want to do is a time for an assessment. It's a time for a grade. We're going to pass. So it's not a source of conflict. We don't care. When I say we don't care, if they want to come and look, let them come and look. They will catch us doing what's right and doing what's good for children, from that standpoint. And if we take that particular attitude, then we're fine. And we don't circle the wagons and start pointing fingers. That's the first big hammer conflict. School boards are always under the management of and control of the board of trustees. That's what school districts are. And it's interesting that you almost work together. And so you must come to learn each other and learn how to work together with one another. And one of the ways you do that is to make sure that you all have similar priorities. It could be the same priorities. And that is, that I like when people say children, we're going to serve children. But it's how that sometimes the wheels come off. But you have to ask yourself, if the other person's how still gets you where you want to go, then the creativity, the interactive process allows you to work together to get to how it's presented. Does that make sense at all to you? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's keep it moving. Just by way of refresher, corporate, you all are, school districts are all established using the same legislation. Okay, we went over that before, and it tells you who you are as a school district. Body politic, corporate. Someone tell me what that means. Duly called meeting, majority, and that's the only time you can make a decision, the only time you can conduct business. Okay? And so you've got to conduct business in concert with your colleagues, other school board members. Okay? And you remember legislative, judicial, and executive. Okay? We're going to make a mental note to get to Dr. Brown. I know you'll be getting your policies, so we've got to get that reviewed. But we want to include in the policies a hearing officer, one for employees and one for student matters. Right? And we understand the legislative authority because that's the topic. The due diligence. Let's talk about the duty of obedience, responsibility in making decisions. First, board members must be obedient to the district's mission and purpose. The school board should ensure that it operates and makes decisions in accordance with the applicable laws and its policies and procedures. That's important. that you maintain obedience to the policies and procedures that you have. If you have policies, you want to comply with those policies yourself because you want to model that behavior. Duty of care. Board members must exercise the care in all dealings of the district. Board members must be attentive to issues of concern. And when we spoke last, I talked to you about being responsible for hundreds of employees, thousands of students, and millions of dollars. One of the largest enterprises in your community. That's just not unique to Bamberg. That's every community in South Carolina. And the duty of care is your preparation for the work that's before you. The more you know, the less likely you are to give way to conflict. Conflict comes generally, in my mind, from a source of panic, from a place of panic. We aren't sure. So I'm not convinced of my argument, Ms. Booker, so I'm going to have to elevate my voice. If I talk a little louder, it doesn't mean it gets clearer, and it doesn't mean that, loudness is not an analysis. So that's what we've got to work on. How do we analyze what we're doing, right? And then the duty of loyalty. Board members must act in the best interest of the district as a whole, not special interests or individuals. The school board acts on behalf of the district and its students. School board members must follow the district's ethical guidelines. That's important. Now, you know my rules. You can ask me questions at any time. I can confuse you in the middle of my presentation, just like I could. I'm happy to answer your questions at any point because if I miss a turn, and you're not the only one that noticed it, and so anyone who asks, everybody else will pay. Okay? Conflict is essentially attributed to a difference in personality. However, conflict is often more complex. Personality conflict, there's different personality types. Some people like to have certain information and have it in a certain way. And then sometimes you just gotta have patience with the person with that, understanding that your information requirements might be different, from that standpoint. Some people use more of an intuitive approach, and some use something that's a bit more analytical. What you've got to do is make allowances for that. Respect the fact that you all do not process information the same way, and then we begin to accept the fact that conflicts can exist, but we can work our way through, right? Right? Structural conflict arises when individuals or groups have different needs or interests, which can create the perception that meeting one need is in competition with meeting another. Can somebody tell me what in the world that means? Sometimes folk will come and they will and I'm going to get a controversial topic and give it a try. Anyone ever heard of something called a mask mandate? It's amazing how we can be divided almost down the middle on something, okay? But some people just think that the mask mandate is bad. Some people think the mask mandate is actually essential, okay? The discussion, though, is not to have or not to have. That's not the discussion for the school board. The discussion for the school board is, what are we trying to accomplish? This side says, we want to keep every student safe. This side says, we don't think that the mask makes that much difference. The mandate is just too much. And that's where the argument is. The question is, what can we agree on? We agree that COVID-19 exists. We agree that people get sick. We agree that the numbers vary. But we also agree when students aren't in school, they don't learn as much. Not just coming from the book, but how to interact with one another. We also agree that as a society, when we went into lockdown and isolation, we lost some of what makes us who we are. So we're talking about COVID-19, we're talking about mitigating, and we're talking about continuing to function. No. I don't have an answer. But I want you to understand that is how you work through it. You look at what's important, and you look at what tools are available, and you look at how you can combine those tools in an effort to try and find something that works for your community. That is the conversation that you have with citizens. There will be other things that will come, that will be difficult, and it could be the source of conflict. But what you do is you understand how you feel is one thing. What you think is another. And what you think allows you to analyze the facts around that particular piece so that you can develop something that is tangible to work with.
So coming to a common ground.
You're working toward a common ground, exactly right. And you're doing it with a factual basis. If you're talking about masks, you're talking about medication, you're talking about where are the numbers going within the community? Where is the transmission occurring? What about what's happening from the doctors? What about our hospital capacities? All of those kinds of things we're factoring in so that we are accommodated because we have thought about those particular things. I don't know what the answer is, but these are the things that you look for. And the more you can gather facts to analyze with what you're working toward, then the easier the conversation is to have. But if you're talking with somebody about what you feel and they're talking about what they feel, it's going to be a short analytical conversation and a very heated exchange beyond that. Does that make sense? Okay? We talked about mask mandate. No one fell out the chair. No one insulted me, at least that I heard. But that is a way that I'm happy to discuss with you other ways that you could discuss it. But I'm suggesting, though, if you would agree as a group to look at the facts around what it is that you're working on. Now, let's understand, because we have something called the internet, we get a lot of information. So we have to think about trusted sites and trusted sources from that standpoint. And half the news, I shouldn't say news, half the television shows, they want to give you what news they think is important and how you should think about it. This is how you should think about this piece. And I'm like, no, I just want to know what the news is and how it impacts on people's lives. And I can sort of figure out myself, what I think about it. That is, okay? And a powerful conflict results from a lack of clarity regarding the roles and responsibilities of the parties. And again, the further you are away from the topic, the more you know about it, and the more you want to assert, from that standpoint. And we have to understand. And you will talk to people like that, and you have to listen to them, and that's fine. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But you must realize that you have a different responsibility. Duty of fidelity, duty of loyalty, duty of care. We talked about those, right? That's the duty that you have. It's a duty that someone else may not have. And so you must remember that overarching is a duty of being responsible. That's the duty that you owe as a school board member. So you take the information in and listen and you move on with it. Does that make sense? Okay? We are still talking about avoiding conflict. And if you'll permit me, I'll give a Sunday school reference. Sometimes, this is going to sound weird, but sometimes I sneak in, they allow me to teach. And this particular day, and I'm not going to talk about the scripture piece, but I want everybody to say that I tried. And this lady was talking about how someone had just really been incredibly rude to her. And I don't know, it just came to me that the words had no power unless you gave it power. Gave them power. That's zero power. That only had the power that you gave it, that you would give to the words. And once you accept that, you realize that you can stand and listen. You can sympathize, you can empathize, but you don't have to become offended. Because you decided that this is not about me. You may be feeling bad, and from that, so when you're listening to citizens and how they choose to express themselves, it is not necessarily directed toward you. It may be their frustration with the circumstances. The more we understand that, the less likely we are to engage in a conflict. Because we have a higher duty. Duty of obedience, duty of loyalty, duty of care. You signed up for it. As a matter of fact, memory tells me I saw you raise your hand and say, I want to do it. That was great. But you signed up for it, so that's what we need, okay? All right. Information conflicts result from lack of information, doing very different views on what information is available or reported, competing information, or varying interpretation of available information. And, I can tell you, after spending a few years in law school, my job is to take whatever information that I have and make it the most important information in the room. That's what my job is. So I understand how information is used as a battering ram. Your job is to listen to the information and understand that there will be other sources of information. You will treat it more like a judge. The judge hears two sides and they both sound right. And the judge finds some way to weave it together so that society continue to function. Does that make sense at all? Mm-hmm. So because of what you do, you will get competing and conflicting information. And it's important that what you do is you try to listen and try to do your research, try to talk to your colleagues so that you are able to stitch together some decision that makes sense for the community. And we continue to talk about conflicts and avoiding conflict. This is where conflicts occur if we do not have solid mechanisms for dealing with this type of phenomena within the school district. Any one of these can cause us to the wheels are on track. Yes, Ms. Hook.
I think it's very important for us to try to teach the students how to deal with conflict. Because when I was teaching, I tried to do that, but I don't know, how successful it was. But there's so much conflict now among the young people.
Yes.
They need conflict resolution training.
Yes, you're exactly right, Ms. Coker. The reason that Tierney and I picked this is because we feel that every opportunity to talk at a detailed level about the source of conflict, handling conflicts, approaching conflicts, we think that that's going to be not just helpful, but healthy from that standpoint. It's important. So I'm agreeing with you, and I'm saying I want, if you get nothing else, I want you to learn that listening objectively and giving credence and credit to the information that's coming, but not amplifying things just to be amplifying them. Listening to them and working with them is what you do. And remember, you are one of 9, and we'll have to go and talk and work together. And the more facts you have, the better you are at talking to your colleagues about what's going on so that you can reach a consensus on a good decision. But if you come to me and you are really convinced emotionally about something, if I can't adopt your emotion, I simply cannot carry your argument. Just a few weeks ago, they were doing a thing on reapportionment, not reapportionment, redistricting. There's a difference there. Redistricting, and so the gentleman stood and told me it should be this. And he said, it's just common sense, you know? And I told him I thought it was a good argument, you know, that it was common sense. Given that, I would need just a little more facts to go so that we can make the sense common. You know, he accepted it. The crowd laughed because they understood that I was gently taking him down from, because I talk with a ton of people, and when they tell me it's common sense, they have decided on what facts are important and what answer they want, and then it's common sense. Common sense is not an analysis, it's a conclusion. We need to have an analysis. We need to analyze the facts in order to get there. Is that fair? Okay? And I think it's wonderful, and I'm going to close on this point with you, sir. I think it's wonderful for the board to contemplate this whole notion of conflict resolution and begin to look at, you know, how do we incorporate that into some of the other things that we're doing.
And people have to realize too, just because you don't agree with someone doesn't mean that you hate that person, doesn't mean that you think that they're an idiot, you know, that they don't know what in the world they're talking about. I just disagree with, you know, what you're saying.
I've stopped disagreeing. I've just started understanding. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I just started understanding. Because if you disagree with me, I'm going to continue to sell you on why I am right. And I get that, okay? But I think if I tell you I understand you, I've heard you, people are like, okay. I mean, what else, you know, once you've given me the understanding, then I'm going to try to stay away from the agreement. Mr. Harris, you know, that's called a lawyer's dog. I'm just going to be straight up with you. It's a lawyer's dog. That's how we talk. Okay? We good? Let's talk about the administration versus the school board. We're still talking about conflicts. We're going to move real quickly. The conflicts between the school board administration authorizing when members have competing information, hold different opposing views regarding the information, and when there is a lack of information. And that's what happens. You talk to, and the administration should share information with all board members equally and openly, and board members should share all information with the superintendent equally and openly. Board members should not try and bargain with the information to try to get some advantage or some particular decision. Not fair to the school district, not fair to the superintendent, okay? And that's how we avoid conflicts. How can the superintendent avoid a conflict if one board member has information but they want that information to be handled in a specific way that may be contrary to the interest of the board? Remember, duty of obedience, duty of loyalty, duty of care. I keep talking about duty. The duty is that thing which your ethical barometer suggests that not only are you to do it, but you are to find a way to accomplish that even when you may disagree with the outcome. That's when you have a duty that you are trying to discharge. I'm going to say that one more time. You are going to find a way to discharge that duty even when the outcome goes against what you would like to see happen. That's when you're using fidelity toward the truth. Okay? We'll move along. Information conflicts stifle the board's ability of being in agreement regarding the course of action it should take in addressing the matter. And that's when you just can't agree on the information. And when you can't agree, I always try to default to understand. Because if a person understands and they are of the same opinion, that's okay. But you're seeking to get a level of understanding, right? A board member's prior experience may determine or drive the member's viewpoint or opinion regarding the information in a specific transaction. And we respect that. It's hard to get a person to go against their experience, and you respect it. Information zone, the school board makes a decision based on the information at its disposal. Whether the information has been developed and appropriately vetted may determine what action the board takes. Information is vetted and verified through the district's established processes. What is the district established communication policy? Formal channels. Information is just that, information. The quality of information is different. It depends on how that information came to be, how it came to you, and what kind of condition the information was in when it came to you, right? And so that's what we've got to work, that's it. We're making sure we have good sourcing. How much should the organization rely on the information obtained through informal processes? Because everybody's going to give you information. I mean, they will have information to share with you. And the more important the information is, I like that response. I'm going to try to cite you, but I'm definitely going to use it. Reliance on information without being verified through the district process can cause loss of predictability. And the hallmark of a good organization is that it is predictable. That is the hallmark of a good organization. It is predictable. I don't know what the school board's going to do, but I know it's going to be thoughtful. They're going to work on it hard. And the school board, along with the superintendent, they're going to come out and they're going to work in the same direction to get this thing done. I don't know how it's going to respond to them, ask me, but I'm going to tell you what they're going to do is going to be in the best interest of our children. And our children are going to be exposed to some of the best educational opportunities available. And they are going to continue to grow because I know that our school board makes a thoughtful approach to the problems that they're faced with. That's important. The board should have a clear, deliberate, and transparent process for reaching this vision. It should be predictable. And that is that every board member has been heard. Every board member has done a certain amount of research, discussion, and every board member has spoken truthfully to the board. And so it's predictable. What is it? That the board will reach a consensus that's in the best interest of children in our community. That's what's predictable. Not necessarily the outcome, but that's what's going to work. Board decision should reflect an understanding of the circumstance of a particular issue and the board's governing role. You understand it from the governing role, not from the implementing. That's what Dr. Brown has to do. And so you're saying this is what we're going to do. Okay? That's what you're looking for. All right? Processes and procedures allow predictability in how the board responds to information. What are your processes and procedures? What policies the board established? Those are the kinds of things that you want to look for. And then deviation from the process and procedures causes the organization to lose predictability and may cause dysfunction. Sometimes someone says, well, I don't care how we did it before. Well, we're not saying we're going to do the same thing before, but we're saying we're going to approach it by gathering information, by reasoning together, by analyzing what we have to reach a decision. Not that we're going to make the same decision, but we're going to use the same processes that we've used and that we tend to use to make decisions, okay? And then decisions should be made in accordance with the district mission and strategic plan. And decisions should, during emergencies or in times of conflict, should follow the same process. Yeah. there's no need to panic and say, well, we'll just decide something. And then you still want to get the information and you still want to reach out. Okay? Board members. Nah, wouldn't happen here. Board members do not argue. Okay, the idea that board members leave their emotions outside the meeting is false. Emotions are present in important matters in relationships are at stake. Strong emotions or feelings do not negatively reflect on a board member's ability to engage in debate, okay? Rather, the presence of strong emotions indicate emotions humanize conversation. Because somebody feels strongly about something, it doesn't mean that you hate them, you know? And that's why when you stay away from value judgments and they move toward things like more objective, I understand, or, you know, could you tell me a little bit more about this? Or help me, you know, where can I find this kind of information? You know, those kinds of things. I like board members, though, to turn to the administration and say, what information do we have on this topic? And let the administration help the board get that kind of information. I have no problem with board members doing searches on the internet. The only thing that makes me nervous right about now is the way the search engines work. They tend to pull you in, reading into what your keyword search is, and pull you in, or looking at something that you look at. And just a personal story quickly. Yesterday, it started off pretty nice, except I got a call from my sister. And I was in a meeting, so she couldn't reach me. She called my wife, who called the office, got me, and said, you need to call your sister. I called her, and she said, okay, backstory. I have a brother who is in the burn unit in Augusta, Georgia. He's been there now for, 2 weeks, right? This is what happened. My sister said, I have 3 calls from Georgia, and I can't reach him. I don't know what's going on. And I was like, okay, let me do calm down. And she said, no, I'm getting a call from Georgia. I said, no, I need you to calm down. How can you be so calm? Because she was standing there when I told the nurse that you should be allowed to see your brother. And I gave her your name, but I didn't give her your telephone number. You didn't? Well, why people call me from Georgia? Because you called the hospital. And when you made several calls to Georgia, the spam machine captured your number, and that's what's happening. So computers are inserting themselves into our lives in different kinds of ways, right? And so we've got to be really, really careful. And my sister's younger than I am, and then, this was yesterday morning about maybe 10 or 11 o'clock. She called the day. She was so embarrassed. I was like, no, we're good. The point, though, is the source of information in an effort to try to figure out what's going on. That's why the administration should be one of those trusted sources. Because once you get out on the internet and you start asking questions, the computer's trying to figure out what is it that you really want to know. And that may not be what you really want to know. Does that make sense at all? And so it's important to work together. It's important to work with the administration, right? And then striking the emotional balance. Emotions can be constructive or destructive. We know that. Examples, name calling. I mean, and we call names in all sorts of ways, right? We take shots in all sorts of ways. And we really have to just sort of like, no, okay, go out, vent, whatever it is, get a sip of water, but let's not allow ourselves to get down to that point. Emotions can distort or clarify sometimes, but mostly, it can escalate. We've got to recognize when our emotions are in the air, and we've got to get a hold of the emotions, from there. Always remember, even when somebody else is emotional, their words have no more power than you allow the words to have. And if we can use that as a guidepost, we're gonna be pretty good, from that standpoint, right? Board members must channel their emotions through the information they receive in order to make a decision. Formal channels will receive. All right, board member conduct. Conduct of board members during public meetings can create conflict, which fosters disharmony among board members, the potential for achieving. When people are offended, some people can bounce back and some people just harm. And some people say, well, get over it. Well, it's not that easy. This is the thing. We must understand. And, can I get one more Sunday school reference? I mean, I promise I'm not trying to convert you. I just want you to use just one. To understand that when you are working, you must allow people to take information, process information, and not impose your will on how that information is to be handled. Does that make sense? Because if you have a solid analysis on what you're doing, after they have explained what they're doing, you are able to listen and to share from your perspective. You don't have to talk louder or last in order to make a point. Does that make sense? And I think the patience sometimes of making a point and then waiting, that patience sometimes help advance the point that you have made. Okay. Communications. Good communication skills can reduce conflict. And the best communication skill in my mind is listening, even though I'm up here talking, right? But it's listening and hearing.
Sir, can you stop a moment?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe we caught that, the end of that, so you're
Okay.
good.
You're my Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe.
I was trying to be nice tonight.
I'm gonna have to wrap. You good?
We're ready.
All right. So the point is that what we want to do is reduce conflict. Always remember the best communication skill that I believe is listening. That's the best one. And then if you listen and you verify that you were heard by repeating some of the things that were said, and then without value judgments, then sharing what you think, from that standpoint, right? Board members must also be aware of assumptions and must be intentional on listening to each other. That word intentional was underscored and moving quickly. My late mother would often ask that we do something with purpose. If we're doing something, she would say, I need you to do it with purpose. And ever since, I started to a small child, and I'm not much bigger than that, right? we always do it with purpose. And when you're doing something, you ask yourself from time to time, am I doing this with purpose? Am I going through the motions, or am I doing this with purpose? The more you're able to do it with purpose, the person who is inputted you will feel that. And that will respond to that. It will acknowledge that. And often will reward that by taking in more of what you're sharing. Purpose does not mean screaming, does not mean being emphatic. Purpose simply means being engaged. That's what we want to do. Emergency response, times of emergency in the district may create conflict in the community. Board members must be able to address matters of public concern and interest in a manner that fosters confidence. I will tell you, tonight, there is nothing much going on. You're just coming together. It's incredibly important that you deposit in the bank confidence in who you are and what you are as a board. Because there will come time when mass mandates will come, other things will come, and people will look to you to see how you handle that. And you want to handle it with the same type of consciousness, same type of intent, same type of loyalty, same type of care so that they will understand that when things are tough, you are up to the task. Fair enough? Great. What to do in emergencies? Pause, assess the situation, and respond. That's what you do. Always pause, assess, and respond. And when you do that as a board, you'll find that most of your decisions will be accepted because the public will have confidence in how you approach. Okay? Right? Embrace different views, perspectives, understand the board's governance role. Focus, time and attention on important issues. Verify information through the district's formal channels to establish a clear, deliberate, and transparent process for making decisions. That is your conflict management tool. Okay? That should be it. Thank you. Are there any questions? The Lauren told me that she was giving me 10 minutes, she'd be nice, but I only had 5 minutes. And I think on that piece in 2.5. Is it okay? Thank you. Okay, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
All right, board members, we are now down to item number 5 on the agenda, which is request for overnight trips. And I will turn that over to
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, so you have in your board packets, you have 2 requests for overnight trips. The first one is our Lady Red Raiders softball team going to visit Florence, May 4th through the 5th for a softball tournament. You've had in your packets a chance to look at the dates, the times they'll be leaving and returning, as well as the roster of students that will be attending and the chaperones. The same is true for board agenda items 5B. This is coming, their overnight field trip request is to Charleston, South Carolina for the Health and Occupational Students of America. That's the nursing classes here at the high school, wanting to attend their conference March 16th through 18th in Charleston. And again, you have the specifics about the trip, and she was so kind as to include a copy of the agenda, hotel information, as well as the roster of students and the chaperones.
board members, you have had an opportunity to receive this information in advance and an opportunity to review it as well as Dr. Brown outlining the information that you have in front of you. What is the pleasure of the board with regards to the request for the overnight trips for the Lady Raider softball as well as the Health Occupation Students of America?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move that we receive the information for the overnight trips as stated by.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that we receive the information as it's been stated by Dr. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of these requests, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it, the motion passes.
I believe once we said receive, but that would be approved. That's what you see to approve the information, is that correct?
When you made the motion, you did say receive. Were you referring to approving?
Yes.
No, that's no problem.
Thank you. Okay, we have clarification on that. We are now down to item number 6, which is visitors' comments. And I do not see that we have anyone that has signed up for visitors' comments, so we will now move down to item number 7, which is executive session. What is the pleasure of the board with regards to executive session?
Madam Chairman, I move that we go into executive session to discuss personnel recommendations for resignations, personnel recommendations for hires, contractual matters, and student transfer request, all as needed.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that we move into executive session for personnel recommendation for resignations if needed, personnel recommendation for hires if needed, contractual matters if needed, and student transfer requests if needed. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion on the floor, been properly second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of moving into executive session, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it, and the motion carries to go into executive session for, again, personnel recommendation for resignations if needed, personnel recommendation for hires if needed, contractual matters if needed, and student transfer requests if needed. We will now move into executive session. Okay, board members, I will entertain a motion to come out of executive session. Have to have a motion. All right, we have a motion on the floor that has been properly moved to come out of executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of coming out of executive session, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it, motion carries. We are now out of executive session and moving down to item number 8, which is action on executive session items.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve personnel recommendations for resignations for employees A1, A2, and A3. Approve the personnel recommendation for hires for B1, B2, B3, and B4. Approve the student transfer request for student D1, and approve the wrestling overnight trip for the state individual tournament.
All right, board members, you have heard the motion on the floor that we approve the personnel recommendations for resignations of A1, 2, and 3, as well as personnel recommendations for hires for B1, 2, 3, and 4, student transfer requests for D1, and approval of the wrestling for E1. Is there a second?
Second.
With motion on the floor and a second, is there any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of this, please signal by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it, the motion carries. We are now down to item number 9, which is to adjourn this meeting. I will entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, we have a motion on the floor that we adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, if you're in favor of adjourning this meeting, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned.